Okay, good morning, and how is everyone going today? When I was a small child, I've told you before. I was even though I grew up on a working farm, I was the oddball in my family. Even my older sister considered me the oddball, let alone my younger brothers and sisters. All right, because I loved to read. Like every kid, I went through the dinosaur phase, reading about dinosaurs and such, but they didn't capture my attention. But one of the first series of stories to capture my attention that I really loved to read was the Hardy Boys. That is one of the first detective style books that I read when I was a kid. The Hardy Boys. And I read a few of those and I thought they were really neat. Then I discovered Sherlock Holmes. And boy, I just absolutely unleashed my imagination. I loved Sherlock Holmes. And I have been a fan of Sherlock Holmes for the rest of my adult life. I've got the Jeremy Britt series. I've got the Basil Rathbone series. I started. I mean, I've watched all the uh, Cumberbatch, but and then I watched Elementary on television when that was a series, and they. Cumberbatch did a good job. Let me rephrase it. Well, anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm really and truly getting ahead of myself. What I want to do. Okay, come on. Where is it? No, that's not it. Okay, why can't I find this now? I mean, it's right there. One more time, let me try this. I'm going to be a little irritated if I can't share this. There it is. Now it comes up. That's irritating here when sometimes what I've got on a window won't pop up. This is nothing more than a brief history, very brief history of Sherlock Holmes. Something I just wanted to go over because this is evidently the birthday of Sherlock Holmes. In 1887, Scottish author, not English, Scottish author, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle created the most fictional detective in the world, Sherlock Holmes. Originally envisioned as a one off, Holmes quickly became one of the most important literary characters of all time. Sherlock Holmes has survived well over 100 years. And I would imagine that there will be those who will still be reading Sherlock Holmes and re-envisioning him in different ways for the foreseeable future. Okay. Armed with the extraordinary powers of acute deduction and observation to solve crime, the super sleuth had a penchant for pipes and deerstalker caps. Conan Doyle was dismissive of the music-loving gumshoe. His mind instead engaged in law and medicine. In fact, the author even tried to kill. Yes, he did try to kill. He did kill Sherlock Holmes. Now, the drawing there on the right, that is how Sherlock Holmes was envisioned. In the center, of course, is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And one of the best books I've read, The Hound of the Baskervilles, 40 or 50 times. Hey, morning, Digi. I've read The Hound of the Baskervilles 40 or 50 times. I've listened to it on audiobook. I've watched the original movie with Basil Rathbone 4 or 5 times. At least 4 or 5 times. So it is absolutely wonderful. You know, the first book was A Study in Scarlet. And thinking back on it, you can tell that this was his first book. Because he hadn't quite caught his rhythm in this. And if you compare the writing that he did in this one versus the writing of The Hound of the Baskervilles and later writings, then you'll see how he got more comfortable with Sherlock, developed a personality. Again, that's Doyle when he was born in 1859. He initially tried to be a doctor. He failed. He failed at being a medical doctor. Then he tried ophthalmology. Failed at that. So he tried writing. Another illustration of Sherlock Holmes from one of the early books. Now, I when I saw this, I was like, okay, he was paid $5,000 in exchange for the Study in Scarlet. But unfortunately, he signed over the rights to the story, and he could have later on had made a fortune off of it. But instead, Beaton's made the money in republishing the book. For his fictional detective, Conan Doyle was inspired by the real-life lecturer of his at University of Edinburgh, Dr. Joseph Bell. Apparently, the physician could diagnose patients simply by looking at them when they walked in. Also influenced by Edgar Allan Poe's C. Augusta Dupin, who made his, from the Murders in the Rue Morgue. I also, Edgar Allan Poe is another author that in elementary school I got hooked on reading. My mom and dad, they didn't like me reading them because, of course, Poe is rather macabre. The Pit and the Pendulum, The Mask of the Red Death, the Telltale Heart, Cask of Amontillado. He not exactly known for uplifting stories or poems. The Raven, his most famous poem. I will not attempt to bore you guys with reciting that poem. Do I like it? Yes. Do I sit down and read it? Yes. Do I sit down and play somebody else reading it? Yes. But I won't bore you with it. So you're welcome, Digi. Because basically, I'm not talking about Poe today. I'm talking about Conan Doyle and Sherlock Holmes. The Sign of the Four. Now, that was a really good book. Really, Sherlock Holmes is a little bit more into the characters, been developed a little bit more. His relationship with Watson is a little firmer. Again, you can see the character development of Holmes growing in The Sign of the Four. And I really do, like anything, when you read books like this, I really recommend reading them in chronological order. And then after you've read them in the order that they were written, then if they go back and, all authors do it, they time skip. Book number 4 and publishing order may actually, in order of the time, is actually book number 3. Why do you feel bad for? Who do you feel bad for? Do you feel bad for Poe, or do you feel bad for Conan Doyle for his failures as an ophthalmologist and as a medical doctor? And ironically, the story was published the same year as Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray. Again, another one of my favorite stories. I want to say it was The Twilight Zone did a great retelling of that story, of The Picture of Dorian Gray. There's been a couple of good there's been a couple of good versions put out of that story. So I'm loving this original artwork from the story. So that's one of the reasons why I'm going through these. These are some of the original artwork from the Strand magazine. Holmes first donned his trademark deerstalker cap in 1891 when Conan's detective stories appeared in the Strand with the scandal in Bohemia. The Scandal in Bohemia for $5,000, I know his business still sucks. Well, I mean, for a first story though, I would love to have sold anyone. I mean, if somebody offered me $5,000 for any one of my stories that I've written, I would gladly sell it right now. And would I sell the rights to the story? You have at it. It's just sitting on my computer taking up space. And honestly, the stories suck, but they're still my stories. Yeah, uh, I've got quite a few. I got a few gigs in stories that I've written. And one day I'll delete them, or I'll give them to pass them down to my grandson to read. Tell him if he ever decides he wants to read some poorly written stories his grandfather wrote. Here you go. Because it seems like he's going to be a reader. Seems like he's turning out to be a reader. Now, Irene Adler, the only woman that Sherlock had any respect for, he honestly believed, and I'm going to come into the person that wrote this article, I'm going to have a serious disagreement with him. Holmes viewed women as a necessary evil for perpetuating humankind. This is my personal opinion. He felt that they were not intelligent enough to do more than run the homes and raise children. He felt that was what they were for. To run homes, run the household, and raise the children. Irene Adler was the one exception to that rule. Now, according to this author, Irene Adler is based on either Lola Montez, a dancer and mistress of King Ludwig I of Bavaria, and the actress Lily Langtry. Now they got here, Lily Langtry, the lover of Edward, Prince of Wales. But Lily Langtry was she was the Marilyn Monroe of her day. She was the Jenny Allgutter of her day. She was the Farrah Fawcett of her day. I don't know who the current sex goddess is for the younger generations today, but in my Marilyn Monroe. Yeah, I think y'all understand what I'm saying. Well, that was Lily Langtry. Her beauty was worldwide fame. You will find her even mentioned in several westerns. Lily Langtry being mentioned. So, yeah, there in several western towns. There's a Judge Roy Bean. That's who I'm trying to think of. Judge Roy Bean in his bar had a picture of Lily Langtry. supposedly. Contrary to popular belief, Holmes never uttered the immoral line, "Elementary, my dear Watson," in any of Doyle's novels, at least not together. In the Adventure of the Crooked Man, both these comments were included. However, there were 52 words between them. So uh, he instead of being called Sherlock, he was almost called Sharon Ford after Doyle's admiration for a cricket player. I love this montage of Holmes. That is absolutely wonderful. I may put that as a screensaver on my phone. Now, I see. Now, I question this. As per the books, the character of Sherlock Holmes suffers from Asperger's syndrome, bipolar disorder, and savant syndrome. I I question the Asperger's and the bipolar. Was he a savant? Yes, but I question the Asperger's and bipolar. I really do question that. I would have to have I would have to have dig a lot deeper down that rabbit hole to find out where they're coming up with this. Now, I had forgotten this point about Sherlock, that Doyle originally wanted him as balding and ugly. It was an illustrator that gave him the full head of hair and made him made him good looking. So now this is okay. Now again, y'all, Sherlock Holmes is asexual with no erotic leanings towards men or women. I don't believe in him in being asexual. Not in the way that they're using the term today. Because again, Irene Adler was a woman he deeply respected, and actually, I believe he, even though she only appeared in one novel, yes, I understand that. But I honestly believe that given the opportunity, if Doyle would have written more books involving Irene Adler, that there would have been something there. Hey, morning, Ramen. How you doing? Ramen, you came in a little bit late. This is the birth date celebration for Sherlock Holmes. One of my favorites. Uh, Book series growing up and still is. I've got the complete collection of books. I've got both hardback and in audio and in digital form. I've got the movies or TV. I've got all the movies by Jeremy Brett and Basil Rathbone. Yeah, better late than never. Now they did try, as I said earlier, Holmes, Doyle did try to kill Holmes. In the story was called The Final Problem. Him and Professor Moriarty falling over the Rickenbach falls. But as in when a TV show gets canceled today, public outcry, the fans, like the fans saved Star Trek, the fans have saved several television shows from being canceled. The fans saved Sherlock Holmes. And in that time period, for the general public to demand that somebody bring back a character, it's not like it is today. Remember, in the 1800s, even in the late 1800s, life was not the leisure time other than for the very wealthy. And the only reason why the very wealthy had leisure time was because they hired servants to do everything for them. All of us would have been the servants or the merchants or everybody else. And the 8-hour day, 40-hour week had yet to be really invented. So it was the 60-hour work week, 10, minimum 60 hours, 10, 12, 14 hours a day. Again, one of my favorite and I think best written books, The Hound of the Baskervilles. Even though it was written after the final, it's placed prior to. Okay. 1905, The Return of Sherlock Holmes was released. 18 stories, including the short story The Adventure of the Empty House, the first Holmes story set after his supposed death. There's Conan Doyle. Again, there's Doyle. Surprisingly, how tall Doyle was. That's Harry Houdini. They took a ship together across the ocean. Now, my actors. Basil Rathbone. The Basil Rathbone series of Sherlock Holmes were updated to the point as they involved around the time of World War I and II. But he was the first Sherlock Holmes that I fell in love with, as far as TV shows and movies, or TV shows, watching them on TV, watching the movies on television. Jeremy Brett, though, their creations of the Sherlock Holmes are actually taking place during the late 1800s. And Brett played Holmes actually even when he was extremely ill and dying. And you can tell that by just watching the shows as he looked worse, his physical health looked worse and worse towards the end. Robert Gillette, the first stage play of Holmes in 1899. There's Benedict Cumberbatch. Like I said, I wasn't big of a fan of Cumberbatch's Sherlock Holmes. Uh, this is updated to current years, and again, it was fun to watch, but I wasn't as enthralled with them as I was with Jeremy Brett's. And got to throw my nod in to Robert Downey Jr.'s Sherlock Holmes. They're horrible. I'm going to be honest. These are a guilty pleasure. If you are a real Sherlock Holmes fan, you hate these movies. You absolutely hate them. They're horrible. The portrayal of Watson, the Downey's, they're absolutely horrible. I hate them, but I love them at the same time. Cumberbatch. Oh, I've got a couple of the Cumberbatch digitally downloaded that I was able to get basically for free. But I mean, they're not. I mean, for me, they're not as good as the Basil Rathbones or the Jeremy Brett's Sherlock Holmes. Oh, the guy that played Watson, yeah, he did. Now he did a fantastic job. Yeah, Raman, I fully understand. That's why I have a love hate. I'm the same way. I have a love hate with these his Sherlock Holmes. With his movies, I have a love hate relationship with them. I love them because Robert Downey Jr. He is his. He's Robert Downey Jr. playing Robert Downey Jr. playing whoever he's playing in that movie. Uh, you actually got looking for his quirks. At least I do. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Raman. But when I saw today, I mean, I took the Sherlock Holmes test, and uh, I just blew one question, and that's because I misread it. The elementary show with Lucy Liu, I hate it. Again, I watched them all, but I hated Lucy Liu. They had to make Lucy Liu Dr. Watson. And it was absolutely, I mean, I wasn't sorry when elementary was canceled. I wasn't sorry. So, but anyway, That is all I'm doing. I mean, that's spent a half hour talking about Sherlock Holmes and my love of their books, and the stories and the TV shows. That it's just, I mean, that's just something I had to share. I just felt like sharing with that today. That probably would have been better for a Friday show, but should have held that off until tomorrow. But I just couldn't. I knew it was for today. I promise. I got a bag of the Jolly Ranchers sour gummies, and they're not that sour. I also tried a bag of the Jolly Rancher freeze dried, and those are more sour than these things are. Okay. Where am I starting at here? I'm starting at this end. This woman is I'm going down. I'm going down to dangerous spaces. They're going down to Australia. When I first read the article, or when I first heard about this, I figured it was an American that did it. To be honest, New South Wales woman jailed after setting friend on fire for making misogynist remarks during a night of heavy drinking and partying. A 24-year-old woman has been thrown behind bars after she doused her childhood friends in petrol and set him alight during a night of heavy partying. She got 7.5 years in jail. Corbie Jean Walpole from New South Wales town of How Long, west of Albury, doused her friend Jake Loader in 5 liters, a little bit over a gallon of gasoline, and set him afire with a cigarette lighter when they're drinking in their backyard for her 21st birthday party last year. There she is. He spent 8 days in a coma, 74 days in a burns unit, and underwent 10 operations. Walpole claimed the act of violence was triggered by a spate of misogynistic comments by Mr. Loader, who'd been antagonizing her throughout the evening. Go make me a sandwich, woman. Mr. Loader was also reported trying to wrestle Walpole and wake her sleeping boyfriend, which added to her rage. He was antagonizing me. He told me to go to the kitchen where I belong because I'm a girl. I gave it back to him and called him misogynist. I was feeling overwhelmed and didn't know what to do. So I set him on fire. After the comments, Walpole had been drinking for 12 hours, grabbed a can of fuel from the garage, and told Mr. Loader, I'll do it. Mr. Loader said, go on, do it. And then the 23-year-old ran to the backyard screaming and attempting to take his shirt off, but the fabric had melted into his skin. He was then into the pool, jumped in the pool. Walpole, with her hands in her head, said, what the F have I done? She had consumed between 23 to 25 standard drinks, as well as cocaine. It's never easy to send a young person, particularly a young woman, to jail. Why isn't it easy to send as easy to send a young woman to jail as it is a young man? Young woman got special privileges there too, you Judge English? They're not as responsible for their actions there, Judge English? Hey there, Ms. Warpole. That's awful misogynistic comment. It's harder to send a woman to jail. That's not very uh, feministic. I mean, you want to be treated as an equal. But yeah, when I first read that article, when I first heard about it, I thought it was an American woman setting somebody on fire. Some American woman, female liber, from college campus, Harvard or Yale, one of those, or some woman, some all women's college, or out in, I expected it to be in the Northeast or California. I didn't expect, when I read there in that article that actually was Australia, I was more than surprised. But that is what that turned out to be. Show comments on stage. What's that about now? Okay, Raman, go ahead and type down something. Let's see what this is about. There we go. Come up there on the right-hand side of the screen. Interesting. I wonder if you can make that larger. That's okay. Well, you don't have to have the chat out then. Don't have to have the pop-out chat if I do this. But I wonder how it works, and I got something else. I'm getting ready to put another story up. What's the okay. Y'all didn't need to hear what just come up out of my throat. Last night, early this morning, an idiot shot 2 members of the Israeli embassy. A young couple on the verge of becoming engaged were fatally shot Wednesday evening when leaving an event at the Jewish Museum. The suspect yelled, "Free, free Palestine," after he was arrested. The attack was seen by officials in Israel and the U.S. as the latest in a growing wave of anti-Semitism as Israel ramps up its offensive in the Gaza Strip. As food security experts have warned that Gaza risks falling into famine unless Israel's blockade ends. All right, let's start here. Let's take a look at this here real quick. October 7th, almost a little over a year and a half ago. Well, 2 years ago. Hamas come out of the Gaza Strip. Remember, Hamas was elected into power by the people in Gaza. They didn't just grow there, they were elected into power. They did an attack on Israel, killing hundreds of people, kidnapping, raping, murdering children. They didn't go in and attack a military base, they attacked civilians. Everybody, I mean, we know what they did. The whole history of Gaza is pretty well known. It's ignored by large numbers of people, but we know, but the facts of Gaza and its history are pretty, they're pretty well straightforward. Over 20 years, Israel pulled all the Jews out and turned it all over to the Palestinians. They left them behind desalination plants. They left them behind a wonderful infrastructure. They left them behind everything they needed to live well and to grow that city, that area, into a beautiful, self-supporting area. And instead, they dug up the water pipes to turn them into rocket launchers and grenades and such. Yeah, I don't know, Raman. I wonder if you can too. I honestly don't know. It would be nice if that font was larger. I'll play around with it. I'll play around with it later. But it is only in beta right now. So they'll be doing more to it. And any food and such that have been sent into Gaza for these so-called innocents, and with what I've seen come out of Gaza, the videos I've seen that had come out of there, even the children are taught to hate Israel as a matter of fact. They're taught to hate Jews. They're taught to hate the country of Israel and anybody and everybody that lives within it. Israeli ambassador to the U.S. said the man had purchased a ring this week with the intent to propose next week in Jerusalem. The two victims, a man and woman, were leaving an event at the Capitol Jewish Museum at 9:15 p.m. Wednesday when the suspect approached a group of four people and opened fire. The suspect was observed pacing outside the museum before the shooting, walked into the museum after the shooting, and was detained by event security. When he was taken into custody, the suspect began chanting, "Free, free Palestine." She said law enforcement did not believe there's an ongoing threat to the community. There is, as long as we allow these protests that have been fomenting on our college campuses, as long as we allow visa holders in this country to advocate for Hamas on our college campuses, as long as our college campuses allow these protests and not do anything about it, as long as these college campuses allow their professors to preach this crap to the students, there is going to be an ongoing threat to Jews in the United States. I find it ironic as hell that the left loves to call Republicans and conservatives Nazis, when they have more in common with the political beliefs of the Nazi Party than conservatives do, particularly when it comes to Jews. I just don't get it. I just don't get it. The suspect had been identified as Elias Rodriguez, 31, of Chicago. They don't know if he's got an attorney. A telephone number listed in public records rang unanswered. I am saddened that this happened. The idea that we've got people being brainwashed here in this country to hate Jews. And those are the same people that accuse me, because of my political beliefs, of being intolerant to other people. But they have no problem supporting groups and acting extremely intolerant themselves. Let's see. I'm looking at the other article I've got here on this. Here's the young couple that were murdered last night. I'm sorry to say. Why do I have a Peppa Pig thing going here? Oh, there's the close button. Very handsome young couple. Elias Rodriguez had a brief association with the Party for Socialism and Liberation, PSL, which advocated on behalf of Palestinians. But he was not a member, and his activism ended with them in 2017. Right. There's that piece of dog dirt. I hope he spends a very long time sitting in a very cold cell. Okay. I'm trying to get down here to where President Trump, these horrible DC killings based on an anti-Semitism must end now. Hatred and radicalism has no place in the USA. Condolences to the families of the victims. So sad all things as that so sad that such things as this can happen. God bless you all. I want to see the Democrats to be questioned on a daily basis like Trump was. Do you condemn the anti-Semitic protest on college campuses and in this country? Do you condemn the anti-Semitism in this country? I want every Democratic member of Congress questioned on that. I want that to be the first question out of every reporter's mouth when talking to Schumer, when talking to Hakeem, when talking to any member, that MacGyver woman, Cory Booker, Rosa Delaney or whatever out of New York will be showing. We'll be showing her here in a few minutes. I want them questioned about their status on anti-Semitism, whether they condemn it or not, just like Trump was. Well, remember, well, has he condemned it today? Even though he condemned it like 84 times? Has he condemned it today? I want this. I want the same thing coming towards every member of the Democratic Party. Because I am getting sick and tired of it. I'm getting absolutely sick and tired of it. So we we've got to get this anti-Semitic activities in this country ended. It's got to come to an end. Oh, okay. I closed that article because we already talked about it. How'd that get put out of order? Okay. Now, the rest of this hour, okay, one of the things here, I was going to show a video of Megan Kelly and Jake Tapper. But Monkey did a 6-hour stream, not last night, but the night before. And the vast, vast, vast majority of it was Megan Kelly, Jake Tapper, and Alex, the guy from Axios. Talking about it. And I'm going to be honest, they did a better job with it than I could have, than I would have done. And for the most part, my commentary is going to be, yeah, me too. I will say Jake Tapper and his book, The Original Sin, that should have his picture there with him looking in the mirror on the cover. Jake Tapper was one of the media people that defended Biden, defended his mental capacity, defended his ability to lead the country. Attacking Laura Trump, and Laura Trump tried to question it, attacking her. Who do you think you are? You're not a doctor. How dare you question his mental acuity? Now, he claims that a year or so after that, he called Laura Trump up and apologized to her. But I haven't seen her responding to that statement and confirming that Tapper actually did apologize. Because I do not trust anybody that stood there and said that Biden was in full control of his mental faculties. I can't trust him. I can't trust anybody that had any dealings whatsoever with Biden to be truthful about anything. The entire cabinet, everybody that had contact with Biden on a regular basis needs to be brought up before a hearing and questioned as to why they did not tell the American populace what we had sitting in the Oval Office. Now, would have put Kamala in that Oval Office been any better? I don't know. Because we don't know who was operating, who was pushing the buttons, who was actually in control. I mean, everything was signed by AutoPen. Who controlled what went inside that AutoPen to be signed? Biden didn't know from week to week what he signed. He thought he was signing an investigation into LNG when the actual EO he signed prohibited the transfer of LNG. Yeah, sharp as a tack sticking in horse dewormer. Yep. Morning, Data. So I've got my own questions about how well and how honest, and I'm including members of Congress in the House and Senate, because they supposedly had meetings with Biden. They supposedly had meetings with the man. And they couldn't tell us that he wasn't there. The lights are on, but no one's home. I I find it amazing, when Richard Nixon resigned rather than be impeached. He resigned because Republicans went and met with him and told him that if they brought up articles of impeachment against him and it went to the Senate, he would most likely be voted out of office. Well, rather than face that, he resigned. Trump had the never Trumpers. Republicans in the House and the Senate that anything Trump wanted done voted against it or ensured it to the best of their ability it didn't get done. Had that Playboy out of I wasn't out of Minnesota, Wisconsin, as Speaker of the House, that absolutely refused to bring bills up for a vote because Trump supported them, like the wall. That's why the wall didn't get voted on by the House in the first term, because it never got brought up for a vote. Because the Speaker of the House hated Trump. He was a never Trumper. And then, of course, Nancy Pelosi took control for the second half of the term. So that killed it, made it even worse of a chance of it ever happening. Why can't I remember that idiot's name? Now I've got to look up speakers of the House. Speakers of the House under Trump. No, not. Do it the hard way. List all the speakers. Scroll all the way down to the bottom. Here we go. Paul Ryan. Yeah, he was from Wisconsin. Paul Ryan, that piece of dog dirt. He hated Trump. And he refused. And I was right. He was from Wisconsin. And he wouldn't bring any. He's the reason why the wall didn't get built during Trump's first term. At least Johnson is doing a little bit better, doing a lot better job in getting stuff through. The no tax on tips, I believe that did pass by the Senate, 100 to 0. And up to $25,000. The first $25,000 in tips is tax free, which is, I've got no problems with that. I said from the beginning that tips, it shouldn't be unlimited. $25,000, $30,000 would be the maximum I'd want to see no taxed on tips. I said that from the beginning. Because I know wait staff over in the big town at the good restaurant that earn well over $100 an hour on tips. And when I took my wife out for our anniversary dinner, the young man who was serving the wife and I, you ready to go outside, Spanky? Is that what you're looking at me for? That young man, I know he got $100 out of me, or $80 out of me for his tip. Come on, Spanky. You're just staring at me now. You don't want to go out. You just want to look like you do. Okay. You know I'm this dog's servant when he wants to go out or come back in. All he's got to do is head to the door, and I'm going to get up and let him out. But while he was waiting on my table, he was waiting on 3 other tables. All right. So the wife and I were there for 2 hours. So you figure if you figure each one of the 3 tables that he waited on. Let's say we were all there for 2 hours, and each one of us gave an $80 tip or a $100 tip. Let's just call it $80 per table. That's $120 per hour he made just in tips that night from us. And I mean, I just know of him waiting on 3 tables because that's what I saw him waiting on, were 2 other tables besides us. So, I mean, wait staff at the right places can make really good money. And if you're clearing $100 an hour, say 20 hours a week, you know, You're talking, you're talking a really good paycheck. And should all of that be untaxed? No, that's not fair to taxpayers in general. Okay, Spankies. Let me get you with your blanket. And turn your blanket into your pillow for yourself. There you go, buddy. 16 years old, and I love them. Don't know what I'm going to do when he finally goes. I'm not expecting him to be around for more than another 2 or 3 years. But yeah, uh, like taxes on overtime, up to a limit. No taxes on overtime. I agree with that, up to a limit. And then it needs to be taxed as regular income. So that's good news. That's good. And you'll hear these guys say, well, well, it's cash tips. Well, nobody claims cash tips anyway. When you sit there and read the bill, because they don't always sit there and read the bill. When they say cash tips, that includes cash, credit cards, debit cards, or other forms of remuneration. So, it's all there. It's all there. That first 25K tax free. So that's good news. That is good news. Marco Rubio uh, testified yesterday in front of the Senate. And it was quite, well, there was some fun to it. Of course, you had the people there dissenting, and you can never have what am I looking for here? You can never have people testifying anymore without protesters. It's really difficult, especially right now under the Trump administration. So I'm going to, let's just go with the disruption. Get that out of the way.
But they have to get that part right. The third dynamic that I say, and I leave humanitarian aside because obviously natural disasters happen and these things will recur. But the best foreign aid is foreign aid that ends. You know why it ends?
Guys protesting money going to Israel and, end the genocide, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so let's see here. I got some timestamps here I want to pay attention to. Let's see here. Share this tab and big in this. Yep, okay, I got to where I want to go. All right, make sure I got the audio on, and I was listening at 2x speed. What is it at now? See, I still got 2x speed, so let's get it back down to 1. All right, this is 2-hour hearing. We're not going to listen to all 2 hours. If you want here is a link to it. You guys can go to C-SPAN and watch it yourself.
I will now yield, and it's a pleasure, to the ranking member of the Full Appropriations Committee, Ms. DeLauro, for her opening statement. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Frankel. And honored to be here with the chair of the Appropriations Committee, my dear friend. I want to say thank you for holding what is an extremely important hearing on the Trump administration's budget request for the Department of State. Secretary Rubio, good afternoon. I welcome you to the House Appropriations Committee for your first budget hearing. Thank you for appearing with us here today.
This woman is far too old to be running around with purple hair looking like a skeleton. Did you see that stupid ad the Democrats put out a few weeks ago where she comes out of her office trying to do a little dance and talking in modern day, using modern youngsters' hip lingo, talking about the Riz and everything else? I am not for term limits. I've said that before. The only term limits I'm for is the people voting their representative out. That is the one and only term limits that I'm for representatives and for Congress critters. Now, if they get, like Biden, mentally deficient, then yes, they need to be removed from office. But just because they're old or they've served 20 terms, as long as the people want them there, as long as their people still want them there. That's why I'm still of the mind that the only money that a Congress critter should be able to spend to get reelected is money raised within their district or within their state. No outside money is allowed to be used. You can't take money from California and use it in New York, or take it from New York and use it in Wisconsin. You should not be able to do that. If you're a senator and you're running for if you're running for a Senate seat, the GOP, the Florida GOP, can raise money within the state of Florida. And use it. If you're a House member and you're in the state of Florida, then only the money from your district can be used. That's my personal opinion on it. Maybe that would get some of these people that have been in Congress way too long out of Congress.
As you know, bipartisanship also allows us to govern in the interest of the nation. However,
her talking about bipartisanship, that's absolutely that. I love it when Democrats suddenly talk about bipartisanship. They only do that when they're trying to convince, when they're in the minority and they're trying to convince Republicans to do things that they want done.
I cannot thank you for your proposal to slash funding for the Department of State by $51.6 billion, an 84% cut to our ability to conduct diplomacy and save lives around the world. But before we talk about your request to suffocate your own department next year, I want to talk about what is happening right now. Mr. Secretary, this administration is dismantling programs that save lives, protect our national security, for the sake of a tax cut for billionaires. It is reckless.
Tax cut for billionaires. That is the mantra the left uses all the time. It's going to be a tax cut for billionaires. They used to say millionaires and billionaires until so many of them became millionaires. So just remember that.
And unlawfully freezing and stealing congressionally appropriated funds from agencies, programs, and services across the government. Congress.
You mean like during the entire Biden administration, when products that were bought specifically to build the wall, materials were there for building that wall, and Biden sold them off for pennies on the dollar, mostly to his supporters? That wasn't just money that was set aside to build the wall. That was money that had already been spent on products to build the wall, had already been shipped there, and were sitting there in place, getting ready to be installed. I didn't hear you yelling and screaming about that there, Ms. DeLauro.
Congress holds the power of the purse. It's right there in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7. And while this administration has engaged in the unrestrained destruction of institutions across our government, nothing compares to the human consequences of what is happening under your watch. I might add that we are, for 2025, we are, in the continuing resolution, we are following the 2024 budget. And there are directives in that budget. And if we are to follow the letter of the law, which is you pass it in the House, you pass it in the Senate, the president signs the legislation, and you have a law. And that law says that for 2025, we are going to move in the direction of the 2024 budget. That is not happening, and we need to question that. There is, as I pointed out, unrestrained destruction of institutions across our government. You follow the orders of unelected billionaire Elon Musk and oversaw the evisceration of USAID.
Musk didn't order anything. Let me remind you, Musk didn't order anything. He did not have the authority to order anything. He and his Doge crew were tasked to go in and identify items which, hey, morning, Neil, which appeared to be a waste of money. Fraud, waste, and abuse. All they did is went in and identified them. It was still up to the departments, to the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Interior, the head of the IRS, et cetera, to do whatever they wanted to do with that program. allow the program to remain or to cut it. Musk did not, and the Doge team did not have authority over one damn dime. All they had the authority to do was to identify. They could not make any cuts or eliminations of programs. This is why I said the other day, this woman just told a lie. She just lied about what Musk and the Doge team did. That should be illegal for her to do. But it's not, because nothing they say or do in the official outlines of their office, official capacities of their office, can be considered criminal. So they have got the same immunity that they whined and cried about the president having.
And a freeze on programs actively saving the lives of vulnerable people around the planet. Food for People, on the verge of famine, already on ships, was halted. Administration of life-saving treatments for horrific diseases was stopped. Your actions have cost human lives already and will cost many more in the near and long-term future. It is despicable, it is shameful, and it is a stain on our nation that may never be fully erased.
The true stain on our nation is we have people living on the streets. The shame on our nation is we have people who are incapable of working, that have to make decisions as to what and how they're going to eat that day. While we are shipping foods across the world, bringing illegals into our country and putting them up in hotels and feeding them foods that are culturally appropriate. We don't dare give them pizzas when they're used to eating something totally different. We don't dare give them hamburgers because, well, that's not part of their culture. We have Americans that need to be taken care of before we start taking care of illegals and people on other continents.
The funding freeze was made under the guise of eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse. But the American small farmers, who feed millions around the world, are not waste, and human lives they support are not either. I'm all for finding and eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse, something Inspectors General Richardson and Martin at State and USAID respectively were tasked with doing before they were illegally purged in the dead of night. The administration has not brought one allegation of fraud or misuse to this committee either. And Mr. Secretary, I know that I do not need to lecture you on what soft power is and how it works. You used to be well aware of how having the world on our side through diplomacy, cultural influence, and through humanitarian role keeps Americans safe and our economy strong and growing. But your familiarity with the irreplaceable role of the institutions you oversee makes it even more baffling as to why this administration has seemingly done everything in its power to estrange us from our allies, sow distrust of America around the world. Insulting and abandoning our allies does not put America first. Cozying up to dictators and accepting lavish gifts from petrostates does not put America first. Taking food from the mouths of the most vulnerable people in the world, millions of whom are children, does not put America first. When we are helping impoverished communities and nations treat.
How is putting food Or tell me, how is paying for gay magazines, drag dance troops, LGBTQ comic books, putting America first? Well, we're doing this in other countries. How is that putting America first? And yes, children starving. I don't want to see children starve. Okay? I really don't. But is it the American taxpayers' job to do that, to prevent that from happening? Wouldn't that be best left up to places that get private donations? And don't you tell me that, well, we're using your tax dollars as a donation because that's what your Bible tells you to do. No, that's not what the Bible tells us to do. The left is really good about using the Bible when they want to. Well, what would Jesus say? Jesus told you to do this. They're wonderful. They're great about deciding when they want to use the Bible and Christianity to support what they're doing. To say, well, we've got to do this as a country because the Bible tells us to. The problem is we are not a biblically driven country. We're not a biblically ruled country. In many ways, I wish we were. I think we'd be a better country, but we're not. We're a secular government.
Diseases, when we are feeding starving children in conflict zones, and when we help ensure villages have drinkable water, we are using and gaining soft power. We do these things because they're the right thing to do. We also do these things because they are in our own interest. They build influence, our global standard, and strengthen our national security. When we retreat from the global stage, China and Russia fill in the gaps, and the world becomes a more dangerous place for Americans. Whose name?
Why isn't Europe? Why isn't the EU filling in the gap? Why is it only China and Russia? The EU doesn't exist?
A flower, the door of the clinic, on the school book. The United States of America, period. It must remain that way. Both parties and you understood that in the past. While we only have a few lines of political rhetoric masquerading as a budget to work with, this is what we do know about you, what you are proposing for the Department of State next year. You create a slush fund for the president while abandoning our allies and partners around the world with an 84% cut to diplomats and development experts. You cut educational and cultural exchanges by 93%. You cut support for people in the poorest countries in the world, depriving millions clean water and sanitation, putting them at risk of death from cholera and diarrhea, and depriving them of food and shelter. You cut our ability to cooperate on narcotics control and law enforcement by over $1.2 billion, increasing the threats of transnational crime, terrorism, and drug and human trafficking. This does not make America stronger, safer, or more prosperous. The administration is putting billionaires and our adversaries first. Americans, our allies, and vulnerable people around the world will be worse off for it. As a leading Democrat on the Appropriations Committee, I assure you, we will not stop fighting to protect America's interests and against this administration's dangerous dismantling of our diplomatic and humanitarian efforts across the world.
America's interests. It's amazing how you're sitting there saying that the Democrats are looking out for America's interest. Meanwhile, you allowed millions of illegals to freely cross our southern border. You're fighting tooth and nail deportations of these illegals. Tell me, how do allowing millions of illegals to enter our country, all right, how does that look out for America's interests? How does that put America first? You just said you want to look out for America's interests and protect America, protect the United States. But yet you and your party are fighting tooth and nail deporting anybody from our country, even the worst gang members, let alone the 19-year-old who's been here for 10, 15 years as an illegal. We haven't even gotten to those illegals yet. We're still trying to deport the gangsters, the rapists, the murderers, the child molesters, the ones who are involved in human trafficking, the ones who beat up women. And you and your party are trying to protect them. You're doing your damnedest. You speak out both sides of your mouth there, woman. Your entire party does.
I thank you, and I look forward to your testimony. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Secretary Rubio, your full written statement will be placed in the record. So, feel free to summarize your testimony. As I said before, it's a privilege and honor to have you here. You're now recognized, sir.
Thank you. And thank you for having me here today. And I'm not going to go off the written testimony. How about I just tell you what's happening and what we're trying to do?
To the United States of America. It is your responsibility as a father and as a human to save children that are being.
The committee will be in order. The chairman reminds our guests that disruptive demonstrations from audience are a violation of the House and will not be tolerated.
So let me just talk to you about the sectors and increase the global.
Okay, now I'm not going. I've only got a short while left. I'm not doing this 5 hour strain. So I'm jumping here ahead to the next. And just like when Biden was in office, I concentrated mostly on the Republicans who were questioning people. Now that the Republicans are power, I'm going to let the Democrats. I'm going to concentrate more on what the Democrats, the opposing party, let them have their speech.
Supply chain of semiconductors, so we're not overly reliant on one chip plant in Taiwan, is critical to our national security, but frankly to global stability. And I think the third, and really was meaningful, was the speech the president gave in Saudi Arabia at the forum. It was, I think, a pretty important speech if you go to it, where he said a number of things. He doesn't believe in permanent enemies. He's a builder, not a destroyer. He wants to see peace. He actually outlined these two paths that exist, the path of destruction and war, and then the path of prosperity as witnessed in these three countries that he visited.
You remember, because since she went a little bit over, it made it possible for me not to cut off the full committee chairman, which is always a good thing to not have to do. Now we'll go to the full ranking member. Yes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I might quickly say that a while ago we had a briefing by USAID senior officials, Jim Kunder, Chris Milligan, and just a quote, what has been done was an 84% cut to USAID. It scatters the remnants of USAID across a dozen state bureaus and almost guarantees that our competitors will dominate in local competition. The fact is, people have been fired and agencies and programs have been terminated. Secretary Rubio, human lives have been lost. Extensive damage is done to the U.S. international standing under your watch. This would not have happened if the administration had followed the law and congressional intent. Congress appropriated foreign aid funding with a clear set of directives, yet with no notice to Congress. The administration has broken the law, completely dismantled U.S. Foreign aid, hijacked funding for the State Department and USAID at the behest of Elon Musk and Doge. I might just say, you don't have the authority. Elon Musk doesn't have the authority. The president doesn't have the.
Elon Musk never had a. Elon Musk did not have final say on what was getting cut. He identified things that fell within parameters given to him as being fraud, waste, and abuse. Quit beating that horse, woman. You keep lying about what he did. Exactly, Spoonie. We're not getting the kickbacks anymore. The Democratic Party is not getting their kickbacks.
The authority, and OMB doesn't have the authority. The authority to appropriate funding comes from this body, the United States Congress, and it is so stated in the Constitution. You're now sitting on billions of dollars. This subcommittee, which appropriated that funding in the first place, has no idea of how you plan to use them. Secretary, how do you plan to spend your agency's remaining fiscal year 2025 money, if not as directed by the Congress?
Well, I think the president through OMB is going to work with you and the Congress on how best to, reset the funding levels for the new year and how to move those funds. And we await OMB guidance in that regard.
Well,
We said that you had to spend this money. You're not spending it. Why aren't you spending it? Why wouldn't, if this money isn't needing to be spent, why not return it to the Treasury? Return it to the Treasury so that we don't have to have as much money being paid into taxes for next year. It's that simple. If we don't need to spend, if we're not going to spend the money, we're just following precedent. We're following the precedent set up by the previous administration. Because the previous administration did not, just as an example, did not finish building the wall with the materials that were on site. In fact, they sold off those materials. The state of Texas bought a large amount of those materials and used it for the wall. Ms. DeLauro, I don't remember you and the Democrats raising that kind of hell over that. And, again, we are not the world's saviors. Not when we've got people in our own country that are suffering. Let us take care of the people within our borders first.
Just say for months we have been asking for a list of which programs were cut and why, and all we have received is this unintelligible spreadsheet, a sheet that does not seem to reflect reality. We need clear answers on how you need to plan to spend this year's funding, and asking for a commitment that you let us know, because you have terminated programs, you have fired staff. What are you going to do with that money that was already appropriated?
Well, again, we're waiting for OMB guidance, and obviously they'll reach out and work with Congress on these funds. that have not been
OMB is
spent.
not working with Congress. The president is not working with Congress. You are not working with the Congress. We need to understand, if we are going to appropriate dollars, what it is that has happened. What is it that you propose to do with the billions of dollars that you have expropriated? If
Yeah,
you will?
again, that's a function, as you know, that's OMB has those
Well,
decisions to
then
make,
I
and they'll have
guess
to
you
work
don't
with
have
you
much
on it.
control over your agency, Mr.
Well,
Secretary.
ultimately, well,
According
we have
to
a lot of
public
control
reporting,
because
you have terminated more than 90% of USAID programs, 60% of programs at state. All are the firing of all our development experts in the next few weeks, and are preparing to fire hundreds more at the State Department. We need an accountability. And if we can't, I don't know, if we can't get it from the secretary, then from whom are we going to get this accountability? It is your department.
well, with all due respect, some of your numbers are incorrect. We have not cut 60% of the funding at the State Department. If you're referring to the budget request, that's different. There has not been mass layoffs at the State Department. I think there's been less than 200 people that have been ripped from the State Department. From the
I'm
State
talking
Department.
about, well, USAID. And
Oh,
now
well,
you
that's a
plan-
different one,
Well,
right.
no, it's not a different issue. You now plan to take on, and the gentleman said you're
No.
going to scatter the remnants of
That's false.
USAID throughout the State Department. Who is going to make sure appropriated funds are spent properly?
Well, they're not going to be scattered. They're actually going to be consolidated in a couple of
Okay.
funds that deliver, for example, International Humanitarian Assistance Fund. We'll also have an increase to the Emergency Refugee and Migration
You-
Assistance.
But Dana, you're exactly right. However, too many people saw that and said U.S. aid, and they took that to mean just that, U.S. aid, not USAID. So they misread it, they misconstrued it, they misabused it. And now they're fighting for it. Yes, Booney, you're exactly right. She said you don't have the authority to, so how are you going to do it? Like I said, return the money back to the Treasury. The money, I've got an extra $100 this month. I've got a choice: put it back in my bank account, or go out and buy something I don't need. Something, spend it on a want instead of a need. Most times I put it back in my bank account. Or slide it into an envelope and stash it away. And that's my emergency money. You don't have to spend every damn dime you've got. And the government needs to learn that.
You
Fine.
mentioned previous secretaries who have moved in this direction, and I just want to say to you that they decided not to do it because it was ill-advised. 15% of the planned cuts, there's 15% planned cuts of state staff. Now, who is going to make sure that appropriated funds are spent properly if you have fired all the staff with experience overseeing the process? Will you personally be approving every expenditure? I know you have a lot of jobs already.
No, we're not. First of all, we haven't fired any experienced staff other than the people that were riffed out of the two divisions in the department. But other than that, I said at the State Department, there's been only under 200 people have been removed. Some have retired and so forth, but that's normal in any cycle. We are also going to
Well,
hire new people,
Let me just
including, as
say,
I've already,
you have,
well,
my time is short, Mr.
well,
Secretary.
so is mine. And that's
You-
why I
yeah.
want to tell you that
Well,
we're
my
also
time
going
is
to bring in
short
people
here.
from USAID.
My time is short. I reclaim my time. You've terminated key monitoring and evaluation programs. Allow us to account for the use of this funding. How does allowing the money to flow out the door while hamstringing your own ability to
You keep saying that you've had all these groups out there accounting for the money. Then how did this money getting spent to gay LGBT and drag comic books or dance troops and comedy groups. Who was monitoring that cash? Because whoever was deserves to be fired. They felt that was a good expenditure of money, of American tax dollars. That wasn't putting food in somebody's belly. That wasn't putting a roof over somebody's head. Paying for people to have circumcisions had nothing to do with putting food in someone's belly. Not anything extremely nutritious and filling. So, you're proclaiming that these people that were doing their jobs were doing them correctly when it's evident they weren't. Or else there wouldn't have been so much of this money being spent on things that the American people, like me, sat there and said, what the hell? You shouldn't be spending money like that.
Track that money, make our government more efficient, and prevent waste, fraud, and abuse. It's clear that from the administration and Musk that the process is ignorant of the purpose of foreign aid, utterly unprepared to manage their own dictates, taking a chainsaw to foreign aid with no concern for human lives or the broader consequences for our security, no plan for the future. I yield back. Thanks.
Thank you. Before I recognize the Vice Chairman of the subcommittee, I just want to remind members that let's please, obviously these conversations are helpful, but if we can allow the Secretary to answer, I think that would also be helpful.
Nation, given changes in the way people consume information in the world today, but that's not something I'm involved in right now because that's outside the umbrella of the State Department. It is under the umbrella of your committee, however.
Thank you.
Thank you to the Vice Chairman. Privileged to recognize Ms. Meng now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here today. First, I wanted to continue to urge you and the President to do everything in your power to bring home the 58 hostages who Hamas still holds in captivity. That includes 4 American citizens, Itai Khan, Gadi Hagai, Judith Weinstein Hagai, and Omer Nutra.
Okay, now Ms. Meng here is sitting there, reminding us that we have American citizens still being held hostage in Gaza by Hamas. But if you'll remember, Mr. Laroa there was wanting to know why we're not giving money to feed the people in Gaza. They're still holding Americans hostage. Why are we sending food to a group of people that are holding Americans hostage? Why? Why are we sending aid to people who have got 58 Americans being held hostage? It makes no sense to me. It makes no sense to me why we are giving aid to people that are holding our people hostage.
And I want to urge you to continue efforts to please get humanitarian aid into Gaza and make sure it's getting to Palestinian civilians and not Hamas.
I gotta back that up so that you can hear that. Listen to this.
Hamas still holds in captivity. That includes 4 American citizens, Itai Khan, Gadi Hagai, Judith Weinstein Hagai, and Omer Nutra. And I want to urge you to continue efforts to please get humanitarian aid into Gaza and make sure it's getting to Palestinian civilians and not Hamas.
There are no such things as Palestinian civilians in Gaza. There are no such thing. because they are allowing Hamas to keep the hostages amongst the civilians. They've got the civilians guarding the hostages. They put their weapons of war in hospitals and in schools. And the civilians of Hamas, of Palestine, of Gaza, allow them to do that. I don't see a difference. I do not see a difference. Does anybody see the Palestinian people, the civilians, and the so-called civilians in the Gaza Strip out there fighting against Hamas? Does anybody see it? Because I don't. I don't see the civilians protesting against Hamas. I don't see the civilians out there trying to get rid of Hamas. I don't see it happening. So why are we feeding them? Why is Miss Ming saying, wait, you need to get the hostages out, including Americans, but we need to feed the people holding these guys hostage? Why?
Mr. Secretary, I too am extremely concerned that your actions will prevent the State Department from fulfilling requirements under federal law to comply with congressional directives and fund programs that Congress agrees, bipartisan agreement, are a priority. One example is basic education, authorized by the Reinforcing Education Accountability and Development, or READ Act. This is a bill that you personally introduced in 2017, and I was proud to co-lead its reauthorization last year in the House. However, during your review of foreign aid, you personally canceled all international basic education programs. As a result, an estimated 44 million learners will lose access to education, vocational, and workforce development programs supported by the U.S. government. These are programs that make us safer, stronger, and more prosperous by building stability and helping kids stay in school. This is statutory. Under federal law, you are required to spend these funds. What is your plan to fulfill the congressional directives of the READ Act and ensure millions of children around the world can stay in school?
Well, number one,
First of all, since when we've got illiteracy as a problem here in the United States? We've got people graduating high school who can't read on a ninth grade level. We've got people coming out of elementary school that can't read. We have a huge illiteracy problem here in the United States. Why don't we take care of that first? Around the world doesn't do us any good when we have got a massive problem here. What is literacy rate in the U.S.? Only 79% of U.S. adults are literate in the share this tab. On average, 79% of U.S. adults nationwide are literate. 79%. 21% are illiterates. Adults have a literacy, 54% have a literacy rate below a sixth grade level. 20% are below a fifth grade level. "54% of adults have a literacy rate below a sixth grade level." and they're concerned about education outside the country. They're worried about literacy rates and education in other countries and not in our own. Once again, we need to be taking care of our problems in our country first before we start worrying about other countries. I make certain I got food on my kitchen table for my family. I make certain I've got my family taken care of before I start worrying about the neighbor. I want to make certain that my family's taken care of before I start worrying about my neighbor. Once my family's taken care of, then I take care of my neighbor. And once that neighbor's taken care of, then I start worrying about the next neighbor down the road. But to worry about everybody else when your own house is falling apart is stupidity.
We are always looked at, I would characterize that as development assistance, because that's what it is. You're trying to build the development capabilities of a country. And I think those would have to be driven, we would be open to doing programs that work, but they would have to be driven because an embassy or a regional bureau thinks these kinds of programs will work in this particular setting, as opposed to this global view on it. But just because something's called something nice doesn't necessarily mean that's what it's delivering on. There are many of these programs where, frankly, if you talk to the partner nation, they would say, I'll give you an example. I was recently in one of the Caribbean nations, and they're very grateful for help with schools, but their number one need is security. They have to build up their police departments and their security assistance. So they would tell you, before we can focus on our educational systems, we want to build capacity in our law enforcement so we can provide security so that then our society can flourish and that could be possible. That doesn't mean education is not important. It just means that the nation has identified that as a more important need, and we want to have the flexibility to be able to prioritize what could be most helpful.
So that I agree, and we would love to work with you on potential legislation and programming on safety and security. But this legislation, it's not just something that sounds nice and has a pretty title. We worked on this together, the Senate, the House, Republicans, Democrats. It's something that's important and keeps us safe. And that is,
How does improving the literacy rate around the world keep the United States safe when the people in the United States aren't literate? Do you want to have this a ruling class is what it sounds like they want. They want to have their own, they want to develop a ruling class of literate people running the country. Them and theirs will get the education, and to hell with the rest of America. You're just a bunch of plebes. They're not concerned about the literacy rate here in the United States. Yeah, no, I know that's a shame, isn't it? 20-year-olds who can't read cursive writing. I sent a letter to my son written, and I don't print, I only write in cursive. And he could read it, and his wife could read it. They had no problem reading it, except for the fact that they said that as the first time in months, the only time they get anything in cursive is when I or my wife send them something and with writing. Because they're so used to getting everything by email or text.
statutory. That is something that has been touched. And so I wanted to follow up also in the same vein with international family planning and reproductive health programs. You have also canceled all of these programs. These programs are life-saving. In 2024 alone, they were estimated to save the lives of 34,000 women and girls, prevent over 5 million unsafe abortions, and serve over 47 million women and couples around the world with modern contraceptive care. You are statutorily required to spend 575 million in bilateral international family planning awards, as Congress provided in 2024. What is the plan?
There's no plan. As I said, on those programs, with regards to that, there's no plan to spend that money. We're not going to be in that business globally. I mean, we're not going to do it.
So it doesn't matter that Congress passed the law?
Well, the money, that's not, the money that's been appropriated is for that purpose, but the way it's been spent, those programs, the way that money was being spent and the specific uses, we're not going to continue to do it in that same way.
What is the plan then? I know you talked about reorganization.
I get
but this
all of
is-
those funds that will be brought under one of the two buckets of humanitarian assistance. It could be development assistance. It could be refugee and migration assistance. We will work with Congress to find a way to channel those funds in a way that comply with the statute, but at the same time are not funding activities that the administration feels is outside even the purview of the statute.
I just want to say that that is statute, that is law, and contrary to your testimony, you are touching and changing it. And you said you wanted to work together with Congress. On April 24th, almost 90 members.
And once again, why why does she seem to be so interested in this? Why are we concerned about how families are done in other countries? We've got our own problems here in this country we got to take care of first.
Sent you a letter about these programs requesting a response. We still have not received a response. I respect that you say you want to work with us, but we need more than words. We need actions.
You'll get a response. What day was that letter?
April 24th. Thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you, Chairman Molinar.
Stabilizing Colombia and other countries in the region. In fact, Venezuela allows a narco-terrorist group to operate within their territory with impunity, constantly threatening.
Still almost half a minute left.
All right, well, I'll use your first half minute.
Not part of the deal, but good shot. All right, Ms. Frank.
I just want to remind the chairman that our president is trying to accept a $400 million plane from a country that funds Hamas. Okay, with that said, this has been a bad day for the women. You've already nixed.
Oh, this part just absolutely pissed me off. This part absolutely pissed me off when I heard this morning.
Accept a $400 million plane from a country that funds Hamas. Okay, with that said, this has been a bad day for the women. You've already nixed education and birth control. I do want to ask you about women, peace, and security. That's an act that President Trump signed into law. You were a co-sponsor. Also, the WE Act, which is an economic empowerment act that was actually championed by Ivanka Trump. And it's rooted in a recognition that the WPS.
Okay, listen to what she's getting ready to say here.
The participation is essential to have women in peace talks for stability. And that's because women bear the brunt of war in so many different ways.
Women bear the brunt of war. Remember Hillary Clinton? Hillary Clinton said, oh, and damn, I really want to get this exactly right. Hillary Clinton, women most affected by war. Okay. Come on. I hate all these pop-ups. Hillary Clinton once said, women have always been the primary victims of war. Even Snopes, this is true. Women have always been the primary victims of war. Women lose their husbands, their fathers, their sons in combat. The women are still alive, but they're not the primary victims of war. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable that they would say that. And that's exactly what this woman is saying. That is exactly what this woman just said. Let me back this up another 20 seconds.
Which is an economic empowerment act that was actually championed by Ivanka Trump. And it's rooted in a recognition that the WPS, the participation is essential to have women in peace talks for stability. And that's because women bear the brunt of war in so many different ways from men. Not that men are not.
I'm sure my wife, when I was active duty military, if I'd been killed during an armed conflict, I'm certain my wife would have felt that she had been impacted by the war, because her husband died, was killed. Just as my wife now, okay, is currently impacted by my military service because of the damage that it has done to my body. And she has to sit there and watch me be in pain. She has to watch me, or sometimes take me to doctor's visits or medical treatments, because afterwards I would not be able to drive myself. I would not be able to drive myself home. Therefore, my wife's got to take a day off work to drive me to and from these appointments. But so according to her and Hillary Clinton, my wife is more impacted by my pain and suffering than I am. Democrats, you're stupid. You are absolutely stupid for saying that. Wear your little yellow ribbon, you dumb broad.
Not affected by war, but we're talking about sexual violence, trafficking, widowed, forced to become breadwinners and taking over new responsibilities. The becoming refugees. And so when it comes to trying to figure out what to do, it's very important to have women at the table. The office, the secretary's office.
It's important to have women at the peace tables because women are affected when their husbands and sons are killed in war. Because, oh my God, I don't have a husband or son to provide for me anymore, so I got to provide for myself. I am so brutally affected Oh, my husband or my son lost their arm or their legs or they're paralyzed now. So my life has changed because now I got to take on added responsibilities because my husband, my son has now become infirmed. That is absolutely and totally. All right. I want to jump to 148 now.
This is from State Department, USAID. This money not being spent. Secretary, we need to have an accounting of what those, what has been cut, what has been terminated, and what may be being restored. We asked Mr. Morocco several weeks ago to let us know about what was cut, what were the criteria for making the cuts, and to date, this is again several weeks ago, we have not heard one word. So this committee would like to know that before dealing with an appropriations bill. Mr. Secretary,
Just as a reminder, Republicans had requested information from the Biden administration that they still have not gotten that information from them. And now I put the fault at on the Republicans because their people have not gotten that information to them, gotten that information out. So, yeah.
warehouses full of food rations that could feed millions, including the entire population of Gaza for a month and a half, are rotting in warehouses.
I would rather have that food be sank in the bottom of the ocean than given one breadcrumb to the people in Gaza.
Houses because of this administration's decision to gut U.S. foreign aid structure. Some of the food supply will be incinerated, will expire as soon as July, while children across the world are starving. The administration's haphazard cancellation of contracts and freezing of funds have stopped food aid from getting to the most vulnerable people. World Food Program Director Cindy McCain called me. They ran out of food at WFP, and the Israelis would not open the gates. So the food is there rotting. And
why would Israel open the gates to Gaza that allow you to take food into them when they still are holding hostages in Gaza? Why? Ms. De La Roa, your son and daughter are being held hostage by somebody. Would you send food into them to feed the people keeping your children hostage? They got your entire family in there being held hostage. Would you send food in there to feed them, to feed the people that are keeping your family hostage? No, you wouldn't. You'd want to starve them out until they get that food when the hostages are released.
This food is grown by U.S. producers, paid for by American taxpayers. And really, I don't know how the administration justifies allowing this food to rot while civilians are starving. Can you commit to us to ensuring that food aid will not go to waste in warehouses and will instead be distributed to people in need as directed by the Congress? Will you ensure this food aid moves as quickly as possible to its intended destinations?
Well, you just outlined, the answer is yes, because you just highlighted the impediment was not us. We're not telling them they can't distribute the food. The impediment you pointed out that Cindy McCain told you about was that some government was standing in the way. And that's been part of the conversations that I was speaking about with Mr.
With Mr. Quickly, you were doing that, but that really gets to the question of how strong the U.S. is going to be in leading the humanitarian assistance that needs to get into Gaza and some of these other places. That is a leadership role. That is a role for the Secretary of State, and is a role for this administration.
And I couldn't care less if they starved them people in Gaza until people start dropping dead of starvation, as long as there's a single hostage being held there.
And with regard to UNRWA, 1949 set up to be there for dealing to the Palestinians, only meant to be temporary. It has been the major source of distribution of food, and also with education and healthcare services. I would like to ask you, tell us your alternatives. To date, we have not had any alternatives.
Well, we would love to find an alternative. We need to find an alternative. We're actively looking, if not to build an alternative with our regional partners, but it's not going to be a group that's controlled by Hamas and has a bunch
Well,
of Hamas
the fact
operatives.
of the matter is, Qatar is controlled by
Right, we
Qatar
have to-
deals with Hamas.
Folks,
And people, it's real simple. It's real simple here. You've got hostages. You've got a group of people holding other people hostage. Is it any wonder that the anti-Semitism is on the rise in the United States when you've got a major political party, the Democrats, wanting to give aid and comfort to the very people that are holding other people hostage? They're giving aid and comfort to the very people that attacked Israel. You got the Democrats wanting to give aid and comfort to the very people that hate Jews. Unfreaking believable. Why? You want to know why anti-Semitism is on the rise in the United States? What the Democrats are doing here is why. Pushing for aid and comfort to a group of people that absolutely hate Jews. Let's see.
thank you, Mr. Laura. Look, we have I gotta get
impairs, right? And that no
For global the atrocities there continue as well.
These needed a medevac for his pregnant wife who was at risk. My department has treated public servants, USAID's public servants who dedicated their lives to this country, including some who are my own constituents from Queens. One example, in February, a USAID Foreign Service officer who was overseas needed a medevac for his pregnant wife who was at risk of hemorrhaging due to a life-threatening condition. She was 31 weeks pregnant after having spent tens of thousands of dollars on fertility treatments. Her medevac request was denied twice. The response was, there's no USAID.
Okay, listen to that. Medevac request. Okay. The word request there is very important to this that's going on, that's being questioned here. Okay.
Funding for medevacs, and it took intervention from a senator to finally get her the care she needed. Should we be abandoning our dedicated public servants this way? And was there a plan in place to ensure the health and safety of our own public servants and make sure that it wasn't compromised?
Yeah, that was a media account of that. That was inaccurate. That's not accurate. The medevac has been provided to anyone who needed one, including in that particular case. The problem is the medevac under the State Department mandates. And the State Department mandates are we medevac you to the nearest available facility that can treat your medical emergency, not one you choose. So I'd rather go here than there. But that one was had nothing to do with funding. The medevac was available. They wanted to go to a different site than the one that was that the policies allowed them to go to.
Okay, just a quick.
Okay, just to clear this up, this woman and her husband wanted to go, let's just say they wanted to go to They're overseas, so they want, let's say they wanted to come back to the United States for treatment. Okay? Problem is, the way the laws were written is the medevac can take them to the nearest hospital that can fulfill the medical requirements. So instead of coming back to the States, the nearest hospital could be in England at a military installation. Well, we don't want to go. No, we don't want to go there. We want to go here. Well, we can't take you there. We can't take you here. We can only take you to there. So they were refusing the medevac to, and I'm just, I'm not saying exactly where they wanted to go or where they could have went to. I'm just using these as examples. So instead of going all the way back here to the States, like they wanted to, the only medical evac would be to England, and they refused that medical evac. And because they got all pissy about it, they called back and talked to their Congress critter, and their Congress critter arranged for them to get a ride to where they wanted to go. Not to where the regulations and the law said that they were that they should have went to.
Quick follow-up. Earlier today, you told HVAC that no one has died because of the actions to destroy USAID. Do you stand behind that testimony? And has there been any assessment conducted by the department to this point of how many people have died?
I think that question about people dying around the world is an unfair one. First of all, the United States is the largest humanitarian provider on the planet. I would argue how many people have died because China hasn't done it? How many people have died because the UK has cut back on spending, and so has other countries, France, Canada. They've cut back on humanitarian spending. So the United States continues to provide more than anybody else, by far. We feed more people than anyone on this planet does in humanitarian assistance, by far.
Sorry, I'm running out of time and I want to make sure my colleagues have time. But these, just so you know, they were programs and commitments and contracts made statutorily promised to the people around the world, and to withdraw them in a very sudden, impatient, and irresponsible way may have led people to die. And I would love to have more transparency in the future. We could work together.
And we have people dying here in the United States of malnutrition. We have veterans taking their own lives because they can't get treatment here in the United States. The 22 a day. Let's look after our own first. And once we have programs and funding set up to handle the people within our country, then we start looking more towards the ones outside. We've got the UK. We've got the EU. We've got Canada. There's other countries out there that with their own pots of wealth that can fund these. It shouldn't all be relied on by American tax dollars. And 55. Oh, that was 55. Okay. Like I said, I skipped about 45 minutes of this here in the middle because it really wasn't worthwhile going over. Well, no, I'm not. Let me rephrase that. It's not that it wasn't worthwhile going over. It's just I knew that. I mean, this has been a 2.5 hour stream already, and I've got things I need to do today. So, but if everybody, thank you for coming out and listening to me, Spoonie, Spittlebugs. How's it going? Oh yeah, yeah. Delorora she is infuriating. And I want to say one more time. All right, I want every Democrat, every time that they're up there and they're staying at the podium and they're taking questions, I want every Democrat question: do you disavow the anti-Semitism in this country? Do you disavow the anti-Semitism in this country? I want every Democrat, every time they get up there, I want that question to be hit them with. Peter Ducey, where are you? I want that question to be hit up before every Democrat. Do you disavow anti-Semitism? Let's put it to them. Anyway, thank you guys for coming out. I appreciate you coming out and listening to me rant. That's really what it is. I ain't going to say I love y'all, but I do appreciate y'all. I don't know y'all well enough to love you, but I do appreciate you. And I'm glad you come out. I'm always happy to see you. But I do have things I got to do. Like I got to figure out what in the devil I'm going to make for dinner. I made pizzas last night, but that's it. I don't have any leftovers in the fridge. We wiped out all of our leftovers, so I actually got to go and cook a meal tonight. I get to see my next week will probably be my last appointment with my one doctor. So I'm going to bake her some bread. I want to take her in some bread as a thank you for everything she's done for me. Yeah, I know I pay her and everything else. A federal judge just blocked Trump's executive order to shut down the education department. That's going to be interesting. I need to find out what's going on with that. But anyway, tomorrow, Friday Fun Day, ramen. We need to get together and see what we're going to do tomorrow. Okay? Because if I feel the way I feel now, I'll feel good enough. I won't be a repeat of last week where I'm in so much pain. My dog, you know I love my puppy. He pushed my legs out. He pushed me out of bed last night. He pushed my legs out enough that I ended up falling out of bed onto my knees. Knocked over my nightstand. Pill bottles going everywhere at 2:30 in the morning. Crazy, and now he's sleeping on the couch over here. All right. Y'all have a good one. Enjoy. See you tomorrow. And as always, be with the ones you love and love the ones that you're with. Bye-bye.